Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to HRC's. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to HRC's Town Hall. I'm Nick Harris. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the proud Vice President of Strategic Outreach for the Human Rights Campaign. I can see so many of you joining us right now. If you are anything like me, your heart was broken last week as we watched the election results. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay. It's also one of the reasons community is so important. And we're so glad that you're here tonight with us and that you are part of the human rights campaign community. And so, you all, we thank you for joining us. And we're going to talk tonight not only about the election results, but also how we're going to move forward as an organization and a community. You all, we're going to jump right in. We have a full program, but it is my great honor that I get to introduce a leader who we know is prepared to really meet the moment. You all, and to kick it off, we get to bring on the president of the Human Rights Campaign, Ms. Kelly Robinson, the first Black queer woman to lead the Human Rights Campaign. Kelly has spent the last 15 years leading winning campaigns and programs. She's been at the forefront of the fight for equality, and we're so thankful to have her in leadership right now, especially at this time. How are you doing, Madam President?
Hey, thanks, Nick, and thanks everybody for joining us. For me, the thing that's kept me whole over the last week is really being in community with others. Because I'm clear, we're not going anywhere, and we are not giving up. So I'm so grateful for all of you that showed up today. When even dialing in can seem like a feat sometimes, you did it because you know that our community is worth fighting for, that we are worth fighting for. And I know it's been a week. I will say for myself, some of the hardest moments I've had that I've talked to other folks that they've had has been talking with our children, trying to explain to them these election results, trying to ease their fears, trying to give them a little bit of hope. But I also know this. Every time I look into my kids' eyes, I know one thing for sure, one thing with absolute certainty. We did everything that we could. We left it all on the field. So as I start this call, I have to start from a place of gratitude. I have to thank you. Thank everyone for joining and for all the work you did with HRC and with our community. Thank you to every organizer who knocked doors, to every poll worker who stood guard over our democracy, to every volunteer who gave their time and their treasure to this fight, every phone banker who made that one more call, and every donor who gave that one more dollar, because it mattered. We needed you and you showed up. I also have to take a second to thank the candidate that led us in this fight, Vice President Kamala Harris. She ran this race with courage in her heart and fight in her spirit. She faced history head on. She offered us unity and she brought back the joy. So when the history of this moment is written, it will show that she carried the hopes of millions along with her with strength and with grace. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And still we know that the results of this election were not what we hoped for. Donald Trump will return to the White House. The Senate and likely the House will be controlled by anti-equality extremists. We got to be clear. We got to be crystal clear that the days, weeks, and years ahead are going to test us. We know that the outcome of this election is going to bring real harm to many of our communities, especially our transgender and immigrant communities. We know that the outcome of this election is going to result in that chaos that we remember too well from 2017. We know that the outcome of this election is going to touch us no matter where you are in this country. But you know what else we know? We know that we survived Donald Trump once, and by God, we will do it again. And some of you might be saying, oh, he's a little bit better than he was last time. Well, we're better too. And look, we always knew that this road to equality was always going to be a long journey. And I think on days like today, we know that road, it's a little bit longer than we once thought, but we are still on it. And you know how I know? Because even in the midst of these losses, we saw historic victories that prove our strength. Y'all, Sarah McBride is going to be the first transgender member of Congress. Julie Johnson, the first openly lesbian congresswoman from the South. Emily Randall, the first openly lesbian Latina member of Congress. Tammy Baldwin is headed back to the Senate. Today, over 1,200 out LGBTQ plus elected officials are serving across the country, and that's because we're building a movement. And there's even more than that. Amidst the losses, 7 new states affirmed abortion access into their state constitution. 4 states strengthened marriage equality protections. And for the first time, The very first time, two Black women, Angela Also Brooks and Lisa Blunt Rochester, will serve together in the United States Senate. So, my friends, I have to say, we, even in these moments, we are not without hope, and we are certainly not without power. I want to remind you that nearly 70 million Americans voted not just for Kamala Harris, but they voted for a future where we all belong. They said yes to LGBTQ plus freedom. They said yes to dignity, yes to equality, yes to our families and to our dreams. And that's not just a number. That's a revolution in waiting. We can't leave those folks behind. That's how we're going to keep building our movement, resisting what might be ahead and ensuring that we manifest our dreams together. So look, we're not only not without hope, but we're also not without a plan. The first part of that plan moving forward is that the whole HRC community is really focused on protecting the most vulnerable among us, because that's who we are and what we do. Right now, we're providing resources to help our trans and non-binary siblings survive the next administration. I'm talking about practical support to give them the tools that they need, everything from navigating their IDs to figuring out safety and security measures in their communities. We're giving parents tools to talk to their LGBTQ plus children, really all their children, about the outcomes of this election. And we're also making sure that we do all that we can right now to fortify and protect the rights that we have gained. Look, Donald Trump is not president yet. We're using the time that we have now between now and January 20th to work with Congress, to work with the Biden administration, to submit our hard-fought progress. So the work that we have to do begins today. The second part of our plan is that we are taking back our narrative. We are taking back our story. I want to be very clear about this. I got to be crystal clear. We are not going to allow anyone to scapegoat people of color and trans people for the outcomes of this election. Let me say it one more time for the folks in the back. We will not let anyone scapegoat people of color and trans people for the outcomes of this election. We know that that's not the case. Our exit polling and data shows that unequivocally. Look, 84% of equality voters chose dignity and love, second only to Black women. A majority of people in battleground states believe that trans people should be protected and respected for who they are. So we got to be clear, this fight that we're in right now, it's about more than politics. It's truly about human dignity. It's about loving families and about the fundamental truth that every person deserves to be seen, to be safe, and to be celebrated. It's about the most American of ideals, that we are all entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, every single one of us. So from the smallest town paper to the largest national network, we are going to tell our stories, and we're not going to let others define us, diminish us, or divide us. Isn't that right, baby? You might hear him talking in the background a little bit here, because look, we on mama duty and we're on fight back duty at the same time. But the bottom line is we're going to need the support of everyone. I mean, everyone here. When you are at home over Thanksgiving, when you're over at the water cooler, to make it clear that when somebody says something they heard Joe Rogan say, you got to remind them gently and clearly, everyone deserves dignity and everyone deserves equality, period. But those are the conversations we can't avoid, because there are too many people that are walking around us not sharing that basic value. So we have to make sure that we're telling our stories in a way that invites others in and helps to shift and change the narrative. Third, and this is an important part of the plan, we are going back to basics. I think one of the hardest parts about this election for me has been really the reality that there are people that are in our churches, in our stores, and in our workplaces that for one reason or another made a vote that was in opposition to our very rights, to our very lives. And that doesn't mean that those people despise us, but it means that they made a choice that didn't think about our lived experiences. So we have to face that reality. We've got to face the reality of our nation at the same time as we reach for its possibility. So this moment right now has to be about going back to basics and not only thinking about the progress of tomorrow, but protecting the progress of today. We've got to keep working in workplaces to keep LGBTQ plus people safe, fighting for safe schools, building communities where we are all seen as neighbors and not strangers. Because the truth is that the future that some folks are afraid of has already arrived. Look, 30% of Generation Z identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, many of them identifying as non-binary and transgender. More Americans support equality than ever before. Our job right now is to protect that progress, to make sure that we don't roll back in a way that this future generation can't advance it in front of us. So, again, I want to remind us that the path ahead, yes, it will test us. We know that for sure. But we also know that we are not giving up on each other and we're not giving up on our country because this is our home too. We belong right here. We have fought for this nation even when she hasn't fought for us, and we are not going anywhere. And we are certainly not going back. Look, LGBTQ plus people, we have been here. We have always been here. I need to remind you, there would be no civil rights movement without Bayard Rustin. There wouldn't be a Stonewall without Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Y'all wouldn't be bopping a fast car without Tracy Chapman. We are a movement that fights back. That is our inheritance. Look, when they were raiding our bars and our bathhouses, we protected each other, and together we won. When they ignored the AIDS crisis, we cared for our communities and we demanded better together, and we won. When they wanted to deny our relationships, we changed corporate America and won at the Supreme Court. We did that together. And I'm saying that because we have to remember that our ancestors taught us how to fight. They taught us how to see a better future, but also how to find our way, how to fight our way there. That's why, even in moments like this, my heart is filled with hope. And it's not a naive hope. It's a gritty, sweaty, do whatever it takes, take your earrings off and fight kind of hope. And I know that this generation is not going to be the one that throws our hands up and quits on the journey to equality. This generation is not going to be the one that gives up on our kids and the future of our nation. This generation is not going to be the one that backs down in the midst of a fight that needs us. That's what our ancestors taught us. So I'm encouraging everyone to do what you need, care for yourselves and each other. Grieve today as you will, but make sure that you come back ready to fight tomorrow, because this movement, our movement, your movement, we need you and we will continue. So thank you all. And I know that the Human Rights Campaign is ready to get to work. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back to Nick.
Thank you so much, Kelly. The chat is going crazy right now. Thank you for the reminder that we don't just have hope, we have a plan, and the reminder that we have 70 million folks still with us. You all, we're going to keep this going. I have the pleasure to bring on John Gruber, Director of National Campaigns. John is a passionate, caring, and dedicated advocate fighting for our rights of the LGBTQ plus community and those who are multiply marginalized. Hi, John.
Hey, Nick. Hey, everybody. Good to be with you. My name is John Gruber. I'm the Director of National Campaigns here at HRC. And I am so thankful to be here because looking at the chat, looking at people from across the country chiming in, one person just said, "Hold my beer, fighting needs to be done." That was amazing. I just think about all the organizing we just did. So I think about everybody here and how we've all been in campaign offices together, whether that was, us texting or hustling or phone calling or writing letters or putting up yard signs. All of those things mattered and they were all amazing. And so I'm so grateful to be here back in a room with you all. And I know that this wasn't necessarily the result that we had wanted, but there are some results that we talked about tonight that I think folks should take real pride in, because we are the people here leading this fight for our community, right? So we're going to talk about what we accomplished and then how we can continue this fight. But just a kind of reminder from the top that you, as part of HRC, are part of what comes next, and there's a lot to do. People are coming together in spaces just like this across the country, wherever you are, and starting to organize another resistance, right? So whether that's an Indivisible chapter, whether that's a chapter of Moms Demand Action, there are so many groups coming together, and we as HRC and the LGBTQ community are also coming together and fight back. So to get us started, I want to start with just something that kind of shows just how great we are when we organize. So this election cycle, we endorsed nearly 600 candidates nationwide, and we had over 43 million voter engagement activities, right? So we as HRC were doing that. You as HRC were doing that. So we completed more than 9,000 phone bank shifts, making over 1.3, over 1 million, 35,000 million phone calls, This included 500,000 calls made with the Out for Harris campaign at HRC headquarters the weekend before the election. We knocked over 25,000 or 250,000 doors through 6,000 canvas shifts, and we engaged more than 9,000 unique volunteers. We also sent more than 32 million voter registration and election related emails and SMS messages. So all those text messages, right, that you either got from HRC or you were sending with HRC, that was us, that was you. And lastly, we hosted nearly 350 campaign events for members and supporters just like you, right? So all of that work that we were doing is possible because of you, and it's also, you were part of it. So you should take real pride in it. And I know that that's something that we should be thinking about as we move in to kind of what did that turn into, right? So maybe we didn't get the top of the ticket, but we did actually make a huge difference. And the difference I'm going to talk about is a very specific difference. It's called a field margin. And a field margin is when you win a race by 2%, right? Or maybe you come from behind after all the ballots are counted and you win by a couple percent, right? So we can look at Arizona and see that Ruben Gallego just got his Senate race called by what? 2%. In Arizona, HRC as a state director, we were doing door knocking, we were doing hustling, we were talking to voters, we were out registering voters, we were doing every single thing we could to win. And because we did that, that's that 2%. That's just a few votes in every single precinct, right? That is the difference between the doors that you knocked and the doors that you didn't knock, right? So we will have Ruben Gallego in the Senate for 6 years because of that, and he'll be voting with us on equality issues. If we want to look a little more closer or a little bit at Congress, we can look at George Whitesides, who is running against Congressman Garcia in California, who's an anti-LGBTQ extremist. And George Whitesides on election night was trailing by 3%. He's now actually ahead by 3%. We had a dedicated organizer in Whiteside's district, knocking doors, making phone calls, and doing the important thing of engaging voters and members and supporters with you. Right. So we literally were talking to our members and supporters and turning them out for George Whitesides. We were part of the campaign. We were knocking doors. We were making a big difference. Right. And again, 3%, that's again in a congressional race, that's not that many votes. So we were turning out the voters, the equality voters that we need to win. A couple other places where I think we can look to find real pride in what we did. In Montana, we picked up 9 seats and broke the anti-LGBTQ supermajority in the House, right? This is the same anti-LGBTQ supermajority that silenced Representative Zoe Zephyr, who's a trans legislator who is trying to fight back against a gender-affirming care ban, right? So they won't be able to do that anymore. In North Carolina, we broke the anti-LGBTQ supermajority. In Pennsylvania, we defended the House majority. And in Minnesota, we defended pro-LGBTQ plus majority. Again, looking at all these races, they were all close. They may not have been the top of the ticket, but we literally were able to go and make the phone calls and do the actions that it took to get these candidates across the finish line. So the last thing I kind of want to say about this is that when we continue to organize, we continue to show up, we have real impact. And so now that this election is over and most of the races have been called, we know that what we're going into is probably a lot of legislative sessions, right? So wherever you live, your legislatures are going to be going into session. That means your state house, your state senate, your newly elected folks are going to be sworn in. We also know we're going to see stuff at the federal level. But the thing is we know what we can expect, which can be, real threats, right? So that's legislation that they're going to pass. Messaging bills, right? Where we know that these legislators, some of them are just MAGA extremists or people who don't like our community, who show up and introduce stuff and just to do it with lots of bluster. And then we also have aspirational bills, right? Bills that like the one in Ohio, where we are fighting in Ohio, even in a Republican supermajority, for a bill that would do non-discrimination for LGBTQ plus people. So looking at this, we can think a little bit about some of the legislation we might see and then how we can fight back. So threats. We know legislators have an appetite to continue to attack our community. They think that we're some kind of political football that will earn them points, even though the polls don't show it. And honestly, every piece of research we have doesn't show that, but they are going to continue to attack it. So today in Ohio, we actually saw a bathroom ban get passed by the state Senate and go to Governor DeWine's desk. So if you live in Ohio, you will have the opportunity to contact Governor DeWine and ask him to veto this piece of legislation. The good news is that Governor DeWine has already vetoed anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. He vetoed a gender-affirming care ban and a sports ban just last year. right? So again, and why did he do that? We showed up, we made phone calls, we organized businesses, we organized community, and we showed him that this was the right thing to do, that vetoing it was the right thing to do. We also know that there's going to be several other types of bills coming towards us in the coming months, including, again, sports bans, gender affirming care bans, forced outing policies, don't say gay and trans bills. And then there will also probably be several other ones. They like to get creative in finding new ways to be annoying. But I know that together we can fight back and we can hopefully shut a lot of these things down. So here's what we can do. Right now, we have legislators aren't in session. We know they're coming back. We know what to expect. The first thing you can do is be a resource for your community. So I know in the email that you all got inviting you to this town hall, there was a list of organizations that you can get involved with. There's a website that HRC has put up that I know was shared in that email. Please visit it. Please check on your local community, whether that's your local LGBTQ plus center or whether that's a local mental health provider that focuses on LGBTQ youth. Right now, they need us. They need our organizing. They need our passion. Stay tuned for our action alerts, right? So just as I talked about it with Ohio, right, there's going to be pieces of legislation coming where we need your voice. We need those people that made those over 4 million attempts to contact voters. We need that channeled into actually talking to legislators, into actually lobbying and making our voices heard. So please keep following our action alerts, whether they're texts or emails, whether that's you coming to a local meeting with HRC or you going to a lobby day with us. We really appreciate it. And the last thing I will ask is to stay involved. Right now, it can feel like a lot. It can feel like all of these things are happening. But again, we are literally the organization that made over 43 million voter engagement activities happen in just a span of a few months. So we know that together we can do anything. And I am so proud to be with you in this fight. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Nick.
Thank you, John. So many folks in the chat have been asking what they can do. As John just shared, please check your email from when you registered here, as well as we'll be sending out action alerts. I also have the proud honor to introduce our next speaker, Sarah Warbelow, who leads HRC's team of lawyers and fellows focused on federal, state, and municipal policy. She also coordinates HRC's advocacy efforts in litigation affecting our community. Hi, Sarah, and take it away.
Thanks, Nick. It's good to be here with you all tonight. I'm sorry that we are under these circumstances, but here's the good news, is we've done this before and we know how to do this again. We know the tools and the levers that are at our disposal. We are not without resources. We know how to gum up the works. We know how to flood comments into agencies that slow the process. And sometimes slowing the process gives us the space that we need so that the threats of the Trump administration never come to fruition. There were many proposals during the last Trump administration that never saw the light of day because people were willing to speak up, speak out, and push back. We are committed to continuing to litigate. We still have active litigation against the Trump administration from the last go round, and we're winning. And just because there are judges that have been appointed by Republicans, including Trump, it is not a foregone conclusion that we cannot win. In fact, we have won critical preliminary injunctions and even rulings by Republican appointees. There is a path forward, and we will use every tool at our disposal. Right now, one of the most important things that we need to be doing is keeping our eyes on Congress and making sure that anything that passes as part of a budget proposal or other must-pass legislation in the next few weeks remains free of any anti-LGBTQ provisions or riders. Your member of Congress needs to hear from you. Even if you think your member of Congress doesn't care, that they are a conservative who will never vote for LGBTQ matters, sometimes we still see that they will bottle things up, that they will tell their leadership that they don't want to vote on these issues. We need to make it uncomfortable for them. We make it uncomfortable amongst their constituencies. Remember, it is not LGBTQ issues that are the mandate that incoming President Trump has. It is many other issues, and we have to remind them that the American people aren't with them. As we look to the future, we also have a roadmap. The Heritage Foundation foolishly put out their vision for life under a President Trump. They've given us clarity on exactly how they plan to fight us. And make no mistake, it's a vision. It's not a real plan. There are not real levers that they plan to utilize at this point. That gives us the time, and we are already engaged in making sure that we know how and when to push back, that we are not caught flat-footed because we are doing everything within our power to take those steps forward. You know, one of the other things that Trump has historically done is to try to divide us, to make it feel like, well, if I get this little piece, maybe I don't have to worry about what's happening to everybody else. And we know that we have to fight as a broad community for every single piece of our rights. It is about LGBTQ rights, but it's also about repro rights and the rights of immigrants. When my littlest was young, we took him to a dinner party, and hang on with me here because I promise it'll all come back. And he was told to be on his best behavior. And his little face got as red as his hair as he watched food served to him that was incredibly unusual to him. He was so angry. And he took his little hand, he waved it over his plate, and he said, "No, thank you to all of this." And that has to be where we are together as a community moving forward. No, thank you to all of this. And we are going to fight every single piece. But I want to leave folks on a hopeful note. We had an incredible progress today. Today, the U.S. Department of Education issued a resolution holding accountable the Owasso School District in Oklahoma, the school district where Nex Benedict, the young Choctaw non-binary student, was experiencing incredible bullying before they died. The Department of Education, not under the current rule, but under the old Trump administration rule, found that this district was liable for deliberate indifference against Nex Benedict and against so many other young people in that school district by subjecting them to a hostile environment, by refusing to address the needs of students, particularly LGBTQ students. And that school district has to comply with all of the investigations and requirements moving forward. And I know Trump wants to shut down the Department of Education, but it is not that easy. It is statutorily required that the Department of Education perform certain duties, and it cannot go away with the snap of a finger. We have time that we must utilize smartly as we engage. And most importantly, don't give away your rights. You have rights. Your rights are not immediately at jeopardy in many circumstances. It takes time. There are many hoops that a new administration has to go through, and don't comply with a future vision of what they want the world to be. Instead, continue to fight until we have won and changed the hearts and minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, I get to introduce a leader with more than 20 years' experience. Jay Brown serves as Chief of Staff for the Human Rights Campaign. Before his role, he served as the Senior Vice President of HRC's foundation programs, aiming to ensure LGBTQ plus people have equality at every intersection of their identities. Hi, Jay, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Nick. Y'all, it's so good to be here with you all. I mean, I am just filled up with pride by what I'm seeing in the chat and how much people are looking out for each other and folks showing up here tonight. I got to tell you, I'm wishing we were having a different conversation too, right? I spent the weekend before Election Day knocking on doors with family in Pittsburgh, where my spouse and I had two wonderful kids, and we were proud to sort of be there with my sister-in-law getting out the vote for Harris Walz, and we were proud to be part of the 84% of LGBTQ voters who make up 8% of the voters overall casting our votes for fairness. And that includes a lot of trans folks like me who are out there knocking doors over the weekend and weeks prior to the election. There's real power in our community, and don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. I've heard so many folks speak to that on this call. I do want to address that there are some folks out there who aren't recognizing that power, and instead they're saying that equality for trans people is part of the problem. I get it. I saw all the ads that you all saw. They were on the airwaves. They were hard to miss. They were vicious. I saw them in Pennsylvania when I was getting out the vote, and I saw them in Maryland when I was watching football with my family. Our opponents spent more than $150 million on these ads across states and races, and they did this despite a long history of these kinds of ads failing. New post-election polling by a GQR, which is a research firm that's here in Washington, proved that they continue to be ineffective. While 64% of voters recall seeing an anti-trans attack ad against Kamala Harris, just 4%, dead last on this list, identified them as motivators to vote. In fact, when they were asked directly about candidates that represent their views on trans people, voters picked Harris by more than 10 points. And while we lost some tough races, we also won some races where these ads really hit the airwaves. We won a ballot amendment in New York, adding gender identity and sexual orientation protections, plus abortion rights to the law there. Tammy Baldwin, our champion in Wisconsin, won her Senate reelection. Y'all, we won marriage equality in Colorado and California and reproductive rights in states like Missouri. And let's talk about trans power. We have a new United States member of Congress, Sarah McBride, coming to Washington. And it wasn't just her who won. First of all, she outperformed every Democrat in a major race on the Delaware ballot. So she did an amazing job despite anti-trans attacks for her. And she wasn't alone. We have trans electeds across the country. Zoe Zephyr and Lee Finke were reelected to their state houses. Precious Brady Davis was elected as a commissioner in Chicago, and that's just the beginning of it. Let's all remember, no matter what you hear out there, peddling transphobia isn't what made Donald Trump president, but it has put people in real harm's way. These ads hurt trans people and they perpetuate stigma against our lives. And for so many LGBTQ folks, especially trans folks and parents of trans kids out there, there are a lot of questions and a ton of fear. That fear is real. I'm not going to tell you not to feel it. None of us are. We are going to help you to hold that fear with real answers. On Friday, we'll be releasing a community resource with questions that you should be thinking through and answers to help guide you in this moment. It'll cover things like how to stay safe in a hostile environment, what to do about identity documents, what are the chances that marriage might be rolled back, and what legal protections you have now and ways that might change in the future. If you registered for this call, we'll be sure you get it in your inboxes. And if you're finding us another way on this call, visit hrc.org or find us on social media and you'll find it there. But let me tell you, when I'm scared, I find that being part of the fight gives me courage. But never forget that LGBTQ folks and our allies, we have power too. In small ways and big ways, all of you on this call, all of you here tonight, you can be part of this fight too. Join HRC. You're part of the work, part of HRC's family, and part of the future where we all build a better future for our people. We're going to be fighting every day for you, no matter who's here in Washington with us, for a better tomorrow. And I am just so thrilled to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you, Jay. We appreciate you. Thank you to all of our speakers. You all, HRC has really shown up for this past election. We are particularly proud of all of our volunteers across the country who have rallied and supported us. You all, if you're not familiar, we have 32 steering committees across the country. We recruited more than 500 members through dozens of recruitment events. We mobilized more than 2,300 direct voter contacts, raised over $1.4 million for the super PAC, $1.7 million as well. Also, $1 million went directly to HRC endorsed candidates. You all, we also are looking for more volunteers and we certainly can use your help. I see so many of you in the chat asking how you can get involved, what you can do to help. Right now, you'll see at the bottom, there's somewhere you can go, hrc.im/volunteer, and you can join the fight. I see you from all across the country. We see your comments. We know that you're scared. We know that you're worried, but we are going to fight back. You heard Kelly, you heard Jay, Sarah, and John all talk about the work ahead. But also, we took some questions from you all, and we want to bring back some of our speakers to go over some of the questions that we pulled from you across the country. Hi, Jay. So I'll do the first question for you. Many individuals are looking for ways to remain emotionally safe and resilient. We're seeing it especially tonight in our chat in what they perceive to be a hostile political and social environment. How can we continue to move the needle forward on human rights and social justice issues over the next 4 years and under this future administration?
Well, so I think the first thing I would say is first, take care of yourself and find ways to find community with people that, will lift you up and not beat you down. And I see that happening here on the call tonight. And I know that that happens in our community in so many different ways. I think one thing that one of the things I'm reflecting on is this, I don't remember if you all remember this, but when JD Vance, at the very end of the cycle, said something about winning the normal gay guy vote. And I saw so many great comments from folks who really were like, no, that doesn't speak for me as a gay man. It doesn't speak for any of my friends. And I think there's a real power in our community and standing up for each other and like not letting anybody sort of take the brunt of a fight and really showing our power together. That Generation Z, 30% of Gen Z is LGBTQ. The future that they're afraid of is already here. And us like showing up in small ways, in big ways, in workplaces, in schools, like there's a lot of change we can make just by having conversations with our neighbors, with our friends, who might not understand all the issues yet, but have an open ear and are willing to be part of the fight. We will also have a lot of actions that folks can take. So if you are signed up with HRC, please know that like there are, as Sarah mentioned, there are a lot of things that we can do to push back and fight here in Washington and beyond. And there will be fights that we have in local jurisdictions that can solidify rights for us in our community, even if our federal government is not playing their role. So just stay involved, find your community, and remember that you have power in ways that are beyond Washington, right? And in the places where we learn, where we live, where we heal, and where we work. And being a great ally and champion for equality in those spaces is really going to be important.
Thank you, Jay. You all, next we're going to bring in Sarah Warbelow. Hey, Sarah. Again, I'm looking at the chat, you all. I see you. We're listening. We're paying attention. One of the questions that came up, there are numerous questions from members about legal and logistical steps to prepare for potential policy changes, including issues around marriage equality, residency in blue states, organizing community support networks, and understanding possible protections at the state level. How can people safeguard their families, legal documents, potential moves, etc.?
Mhm. So first, let me start by saying I can't give legal advice to any given person, but what I can talk about are some things that you may want to consider. And keep in mind that these are very personal decisions, and what's right for one person may not be right for another. But in this moment, keep in mind that the Trump administration does not actually take power until January. So there is a window in which people can make really important changes. You may want to consider updating your passport. If you are somebody who has a passport that doesn't clearly reflect your name or your gender marker, this is a time in which you can make that change. And that passport, if you're an adult, will be good for 10 years. And if you're a child, it'll be good for 5 years. Families can take important steps to protect themselves that are things that all married couples should think about. Do you need a second parent adoption? Do you need to take steps to update your will, to get a will, a power of attorney? Really important things that folks can do. And marriage equality is not going away tomorrow. And it's really important for people to understand that. This is a decision by the US Supreme Court, and there are conservative justices who've made subsequent decisions that support marriage equality. So we have to be alert. We have to be fighting. We have to be engaged. But please do not think that this is a foregone conclusion.
Thank you, Sarah. Also coming up next, we have John Gruber. Hey, John. One of the questions that we receive from across the country, many allies and community members are seeking actionable ways to support the LGBTQ plus community, particularly in light of perceived political challenges. How can people become more involved locally and nationally, and how can they advocate effectively for LGBTQ plus rights?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces to that, right? The first thing is what I was talking about earlier, which is getting involved with HRC's list of resources. We've done a lot of that homework for you, right? We've actually created a web page. I know it was being pasted in the chat a couple of times where you can actually find out, hey, there's a local LGBTQ center in my community that I could go visit. There are probably people that need assistance, right? You know, they're probably getting inundated with requests, so you can do that. You can join us in our advocacy, right? So I know that a lot of folks have done that before, but I think it's more important than ever now. I think that the main thing that we have to do, right, is continue to monitor what legislation is happening at the state level and at the federal level, particularly at the state level, right, or even at the municipal level, right? So, like, even in places like California, we've seen things like forced outing policies. You might see more of that. You might see book bans locally. So, pay attention and show up. And so, again, advocacy, whether it's at the state level, the municipal level, or the federal level, is really encouraged and helpful. And at HRC, what we do is we really track that for you, and we try to get you to take action, right? So what we will do is we will set up action alerts, and you'll get an action alert. Maybe it's for a bill that we don't necessarily like that could hurt the LGBTQ community. What we will do is we will send you an action alert. You will literally be able to contact your state representative or whoever is making that decision, right, and be able to tell them how you feel about that piece of legislation. We also do the same thing for the federal level, right? So as these Republicans take over, they're going to try and pass some things that we don't like. You'll be able to take action, but only if you actually click that button and do it. It takes about 30 seconds, and you can send it to all of your friends, right? So, like, this is a way that we know that these things are being delivered. And the other thing is, right, is like advocacy is also actually showing up in person, right? So we're not in COVID anymore. But most places are very easy to get into. We encourage you to show up and, go to lobby days or organize your own lobby day if there isn't one near you at your state capitol or even at your local city hall, and make sure that like you are there and you are talking to your legislators, right? Because it's their job to respond to you and be responsive to you. Same thing with the federal level. I think it's really great if folks are able to organize and kind of show up at that level, and make sure they're talking to their members of Congress. Again, even if they don't necessarily agree with you, even if they are MAGA people, they are still your representative. You are still their constituent. They should be hearing from you. And then the last thing I think people can do, and I kind of referenced this at the beginning, right, is stay involved in these new spaces that are popping up. There are going to be a lot of new spaces. There are going to be people coming together. There are going to be people, right, God bless them, who are like, oh my God, I just kind of like woke up when Donald Trump got reelected, and like, this is so scary. And they're going to be trying to start their own organizations. Show up as HRC, show up as yourself, make sure that they're including our voices, and that we are bringing those voices to HRC because we need them.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you. You all, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to all of our speakers. I can see from the chat so many of you are scared and afraid and also wondering how to get involved, how you can get involved. So we continue to say, you all, please visit hrc.org for the latest updates. You can make contributions. You can also text JOIN, that's JOIN, to 472-472. Again, text JOIN, JOIN, to 472-472. You also can go to hrc.org/donate. You all, we will not go back. We will continue to fight. And I'm looking at the chat where we are showing up for one another in community. So again, you all get involved, join HRC. Thank you and have a good evening.